This invasion was put into the black community. Most of all the illegals that have come to the United States.
It takes away our voice as black communities because now our voice for the things that we need within our community, we're not being properly represented when our vote is being neutralized by a vote that shouldn't be counted.
Welcome to No Border, No Country. We're in for a treat here today. We've got some incredible minds who have joined us in the studio, and we're going to really dive into some important issues. I'm joined by Pastor David Lowery, who is no stranger to this program, and he's in the house. He's
Yes.
here. He was here for the Trump inauguration, and we're very fortunate to have him here. And he has brought with us Kevin McGary, who you're going to be very impressed by when you hear this guy talk, because he just blew me away when we were talking before the show. So this is going to be a treat. Pastor Lowery, tell us, why are you in Washington and what have you been up to here?
Well, I wanted to come in and show my support for President Trump. He has been very vigilant about the minority community. When he created the First Step Act, a lot of black men came home from jail. And because of the fact that we know that with Tom, all the illegals here, that the support for him had to be. So I was here to see the inauguration. I was here to connect with people so that we can start discussing things on how the black community could move forward under President Trump. In 2019, he created the Platinum Plan. And so that plan would have made the black communities totally self-sufficient in the 4 years, and we'll talk about that. But I was just here to support him during this time and network with other people so that we can discuss, like with you, Brian, how it affects our community and the black community and what we can do to move forward and get out of this rut of non-economics and the thought of discrimination. So there's so many facets to this visit on why I'm here to be able to make a difference in my community.
So there were a lot of autopsies done on this presidential campaign we just had, and people were concerned about inflation and a lot of other issues, but this immigration issue seemed to be the dominant issue. It really propelled Trump, not only in his first presidency or his term, but in this term, it really pushed him into office based on what he was proposing. Why is this issue so resonating in communities all over the country?
Well, this invasion was put into the black community. Most of all the illegals that have come to the United States, they were put directly into the black community. From what we saw, it was black people have not been voting for the Democratic Party for at least 10 to 12 years in record numbers. And so once the Democrats saw that, they had to come up with a different idea because black people was just saying, okay, we got to come off the plantation and the mine 60 years under the Democratic leadership and look at our communities, look at our schools, no economics, we don't own anything. Our children aren't being taught to be good citizens. They're not taught to be educated, black kids. And so this thing has been a burden to our community. And the fact of the matter is, the black community has suffered greatly under the Democratic leadership. And a lot of black leaders have been crying about reparations for the black community. With them saying that, it caused the Democratic Party to say, hey, you know what? We don't have money for that. How would we implement this reparation things? Yeah, we know that black people helped build this country, but how can we pay you when we don't have a plan? Well, to the American people and patriots across this country, you had a plan when you brought millions of illegals over to this country. You gave them resources that the black community has been requesting for years now. And so if you say that, oh, well, reparations is not feasible and how would we structure it? Well, my message to the Democrats is you structure it the same way you structure it to bring these illegals in, to come into our communities and take our resources, cause crimes, kill people, and just walk away. So if you want to be true and fair about the matter, then The Democratic Party has been the one that has destroyed the black community, and this is much needed so that the black community can get on its feet.
Pastor Lowery, you're based out of Chicago, and I was impressed to hear, Kevin, your views on a lot of these things. You're based in San Francisco, which we could do a whole 2 hours on that. The issue of the sanctuary cities has been a really pet issue of mine. I've done a lot of research into this, and I had an article last week in Chronicles magazine talking about what does this Trump victory represent as far as the future of sanctuary cities. And my proposal, my idea was that this is the end of the road. They've failed. They've had their shot, and it's been a disaster. Talk a little bit about what's life been like in San Francisco, which has really been one of the prominent sanctuary cities with some, in my opinion, really whacked out politicians and crazy ideas. What toll has that policy had on San Francisco, the black community there, and the community at large?
Yeah, I think in general, sanctuary cities around the country have endured the same kind of problems. Now, what you have in San Francisco is we're one of the pioneers of the sanctuary city policy. We started that, a couple decades ago, where we said, look, we need as many illegals as we can get in the city. We'll give them services. We'll give them driver's licenses. For California and for cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles in California, what they were counting on is if we can get illegals driver's licenses, then ultimately they'll be able to vote because, at that time, a decade or so ago, a couple decades ago, the only requirement that you had when you voted was a driver's license. So they started giving illegals driver's licenses in San Francisco probably 20 years ago. And so what we're finding is that this is a real scheme in order to really disenfranchise. We used to hear a lot from Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. Voter disenfranchisement. The biggest voter disenfranchisement is illegal votes. That is by far, and that affects everyone. So we're not talking about black voter disenfranchisement. Oh, you're requiring us to have an ID. No. We're talking about the ability for illegals to vote, to literally vote en masse, and that takes away our voice as American citizens. It takes away our voice as black communities because now our voice for the things that we need within our community, like say we vote in local elections, we're not being properly represented when our vote is being neutralized by a vote that shouldn't be counted from somebody that's not supposed to be here, right? So we've seen this sort of systematic degradation of American life by virtue of this, unlimited illegal alien invasion, if you will. And so the sanctuary cities in San Francisco has seen a disproportional justice system for a while. Now, other cities around the country now are starting to say, well, it just seems like we have multi-tiers of justice because if I get stopped driving, drunk for a first offense, I'm still going to spend a night in jail. Illegals, they get multiple offenses. They get no consequence. They get let go. They get, and a lot of times they don't have a driver's license or insurance. Most cities and most states require driver's license and insurance. When illegals get caught, with a traffic infraction or whatever, they have neither, and there's no consequence. They just keep going. So we started to see that, and we said, this is really not fair for any American citizen, especially not fair for black American citizens, because on our relatively minor infractions, we're getting the book thrown at us by local judges. When they see an illegal, they say, oh no, it's okay. He or she are new here, they don't know our laws yet. It's okay. They let them go. So we see this, and so we see the sanctuary city policy as disproportional and racist in a way because it really does elevate another race or races, people from all other parts of the world, over the interests of the American citizen, or in our case, the black community. And so it's that's the main thing that we've noticed over the past couple of decades in San Francisco. We've seen this sort of disparity in the way that they treat this.
You were mentioning voting. I had a question. I'd like to hear from both of you on this. The people who are for open borders, they make some explanations or defenses of their policies that are just incredibly insulting, I find them. in particular, ID to vote, to prove you're a citizen of the country. The defense they have is to shame people by saying, well, black people can't all get IDs. When you've seen interviews, they go walk down the street talking to random black people saying, do you have an ID? Of course I do. Do you have an ID? Of course I do. So what is the reaction in the black community when they hear this, where they say, the implicit message of it is, you're not intelligent enough or whatever to get an ID when it's essential to function in this society today? How is that received?
Well, it's received with great disdain, because basically it's insulting. They're insulting blacks by saying, look, you know, they're infantilizing blacks, right? They're saying, well, you know, this particular segment, like we've heard Biden, we've heard a couple other people say they don't even know how to use a computer, so therefore they can't go online, they can't, you know, check and see what the process is for getting ID. So we see these insulting tropes that are racist tropes directed at the black community, as if we're non-functioning as a demographic, right? That we're so innately incapable that therefore we have to give them special treatment, which means that we kind of practically have to hold their hand or make sure that they don't have an ID. Now, the reality is everybody in America, as an American citizen, has to have an ID. You have to have an ID to buy cigarettes. You have to have an ID to buy alcohol. You have to have an ID to drive a car. You have to have an ID to work. You have to have an ID to go to school. You have to have an ID to enter into a federal building. You have to have an ID to go to a doctor. Everybody, to cash a check, everybody has an ID. Okay, so it's insulting to think that, well, blacks can't get an ID. It's a lie, and it's insulting, and it infantilizes the black community when you say something.
So, fostering this mentality, I would argue, are these sanctuary mayors who are really despicable when you look at some of the things they've said, the defenses of the chaos they've created. Pastor Lowery, you're in Chicago. We did a poll or a ranking recently where we named Brandon Johnson the worst sanctuary mayor in America. I know you know what he's up to inside out. We saw these meetings of the city government there with these raucous clips of the people just outraged, I would argue rightfully outraged, at the misprioritization of illegal aliens over the citizens. What is the political temperature in Chicago right now as it relates to that? Well,
the political temperature is what we saw during this election. Black men came out in record numbers and voted. We directed our families to vote for the Republicans. And the fact of the matter is black people have really waken up and see what's going on around them. Just like Kevin said, the ID, not being able to get an ID came from reentry programs. There were a lot of black men who were undereducated, went to jail, and when they come home, they do not, or they're not educated enough, or they do not know the process on getting IDs. And I think the government in Chicago and across the country took that and said, you know what, and they put it out mass all over, say, well, black people are not smart enough to get an ID. So with that type of narrative out there, it's very, very offensive, just like Kevin said, because everybody I know has an ID. It's something that should be required when you come to this country. That allows you to vote, that allows you to be identified, who you are, where you stand. So when the Democrats was able to use that narrative to say black men, they don't know how to get IDs, they don't know how to do this, that was a way of trying to make our community look like we were not smart enough to handle ourselves or our community. So what you're seeing now in Chicago with a lot of our organizations like Chicago Red, the Living and Driving While Black Foundation, we're working in different avenues. You know, those young people with Chicago Red, they're at every city council meeting. These are citizens, these are young people who have already crossed the line to be part of the Republican Party. And what Brandon Johnson is experiencing right now, he's so inexperienced, he doesn't have a clue of leadership. And what he's experiencing right now is that the black community, who he said when he got into office, he said, I'm going to make sure black people are economically sound. I'm going to make sure the schools are this. You know, all the racism that you've experienced in the past with the Republicans who never had a mayor in over 100 years. You know, we want to make sure that you guys are going to be self-sufficient. And that was the big lie. So the black community has saw Brandon Johnson. We know right now he doesn't have a clue. It was never about the black community, but he just used us because we vote in record numbers in elections like this. Black people dominate the city of Chicago and pretty much the state and the city. So he had to lie and do whatever he had to do to make us feel like, okay, here's a black man like us, a black face. So when we got rid of Lowery Lightfoot, then Brandon came and ran on the fact of racism. You know, you guys got to put me in. You can't vote for Paul Ballots. He's a white racist. I'm like y'all. You know, I grew up like y'all, so vote for me so that we can move forward. And that was the big lie. The black community has seen it, and he is in horrible trouble. We want our communities back. And so to the Al Sharptons and the Jesse Jacksons, who have been the gatekeepers, the organizations like the Greek organizations, the Divine Nine, these are all house Negroes who have been trying to keep the black community from rising up by controlling them and by lying and presenting things that are not true. So Chicago is ready right now to be able to get Brandon out, and we want to put somebody into office that understand the needs of the black community and implement those things. And it's not just for the black community. It's for the entire Chicago area and the state. Because I see it as this. As Americans, when one of us is hurting, all of us hurting. And two white Americans in this country, it's our responsibility, it's your responsibility as well as Americans that we come together and uplift the black community just like everybody else. So, you know, like I said, we spend more money than everybody put together, and yet we don't own nothing. So Brandon Johnson's days are numbered.
It seems like residents of Chicago or any other sanctuary community might forgive a mayor if he were to say, I was wrong, I tried these policies, clearly they don't work, we're going to go in a different direction. I mean, you saw that with the illegals in O'Hare Airport sleeping on the floor. You saw them in the police stations. I mean, it's a disaster. You saw at the town halls how upset the residents are. But yet it seems like he's doubling down. He's going even further.
Well, Brandon has to double down. He's a puppet for Barack Obama and the school board system. And so when he became the mayor, all the promises he had made, he had no intention on fulfilling them. But what he did, he broke his power down and made 13 other co-mayors. So the school board, the school unions are running the city now, and that's why there's no resources. They're right now fighting for more money for the union and the teachers, and yet we have this disparity in education. So he thought that he would be able to smooth us and those black leaders who have been lying and, you know, saying, oh yeah, we're going to make sure the black community is well intact. Now that the black community sees that, and now that we've come against him and we're standing up saying, no, you didn't fulfill nothing, we're throwing you out of here, now they're in a position to where they don't know what to do because the black community doesn't trust them. And like I said, we're moving forward to become self-sufficient. And Brandon is gone. Most of all of those aldermen who promoted the sanctuary city, because we tried to remove it. And they played all sorts of tricks. That's why we ended up going to the city council saying, okay, we're going to show you our visibility, and we're going to show you that we're not dummies like you think that we are, but we're going to put you on Front Street. You work for us. You work for the people of Chicago. And if that's not what you're doing, we're going to remove you. And so they have not been able to get black people comfortable enough to say, oh, yeah, I made a mistake. I didn't understand that. But just give me 4 more years to continue to destroy you. We are wide awake. We're going to keep protesting the city hall meetings. As a pastor and a man in the community, I'm going to keep galvanizing the street organizations that's here galvanizing the churches in Chicago. I know Tom Homan personally. He'll be in Chicago tomorrow. Ben Bergquam, I just spoke to him this morning, and we're going to meet in Chicago Wednesday, and we're going to set a game plan up to help Tom remove all these illegals out of our community and send them back where we don't care where they go. We just want them out of our community so our community can start to get ourselves back together and we can become prominent just like everybody else.
So you mentioned Tom Homan, Early's former senior fellow. There was a little clip. Brandon Johnson is trying to trade shots in the media with Tom Homan. Here's a clip of that.
Mayor Brandon Johnson is responding to the incoming border czar, Tom Homan's promise to begin mass deportations in Chicago. The mayor says Chicago remains a sanctuary city and police will not be acting as ICE agents.
This is not about immigration reform. This is about an administration who's determined to stoke fear into the people of this country.
At a Republican holiday party earlier this week, Homan threatened to arrest the mayor if he tried to stand in the way of the incoming administration's plan.
So, according to him, prioritizing your residents, your American citizen residents, is stoking fear. How does that work?
Well, that's a narrative that he's trying to put out there to the world to make everybody think that he's doing a good job in Chicago and this Tom Homan is just coming in on a witch hunt. But every time I see him, the first thing that comes into my mind is he's a total idiot. How can he sit back and look at the crime in Chicago, look at the black community, how it's inundated with crime, no economics, all of these things that he should be focusing on, he hasn't. And so for him to get on this thing and say, well, you know, they're trying to create fear, it's an insult to the black community when we know exactly what he has done, which is nothing. He's a liar. He's a thief. All the money that came into the black community. Let me give you this narrative. When President Trump was in office, before he left office, and you hear President Trump say, I've given more money to the black community than anybody. And he has. Take, for instance, in the last 4 years, that was $240 billion allocated to the black community. When President Trump sent $351 million, the first installment, to the black community to help it get back on its feet, then this mayor, Lowery Lightfoot at the time, took the money and the black community never knew about it. You know, so this money has been sitting there all this time. And so what they do is that, like when Trump sent the money, we didn't even know nothing about it. But when it came to the place where it was time for the re-election, and then the money came up, because what she did was took the money and reappropriated it to an emergency fund. Because if you don't use the money for what it was for, you'll reappropriate it and put it somewhere else. So when she did that, and then I met with Lowery Lightfoot, and I promised her, I said, I guarantee you, you will not be the mayor again in Chicago. And we put her out of office. But what she did with Barack Obama and Brandon Johnson, they said, you know, we got all this money here, how can we get it out? And that's why I believe that they started to bring the illegals in, $351 million that President Trump put into the black community to help the West Side with crime, different hospitals, mental health, all of that stuff that money was supposed to be used for that. And once that we found out that the money was supposed to be used for the black community, they reappropriated it. Lowery Lightfoot put it into an emergency fund, and then Brandon Johnson used the money to help the illegals. And so when they did that $351 million, they took $47 million as the first pot, and only $3 million went to the migrants. And the other $45 million went to administrative costs for the city of Chicago. So this was an opportunity for them to take money away from the black community, take money from President Trump, who put the money there, and make it seem as though they were trying to help these poor illegals who were coming here and help them get on their feet. And at the same time, the black community is struggling. We're struggling with crime. We're struggling with the drug problems. We're struggling with the policing problem. And so when we found out that President Trump put that money in, I think that was the turn of the tide. Our eyes were open, and we knew from that point that there's probably been millions and millions of dollars that has been allocated to the black community, but we don't know about it because those House Negro politicians hide it and they reappropriate it, and it never gets to us. And so when we saw that, that was the tip of the iceberg to say, you know what? We started researching and finding out that all this money has been coming to the city for the black community, but never getting to us because the bad politicians, the NGOs take the money, and then they put it in other places. So the black community never saw that money, and yet they claim as if they do, and then they take the money and say, well, you know what? We distributed that money, and look at the black community still in the same place. They're not trying to make any difference. So that was key for us, and I understand this. Black people are wide awake, and we are doing a lot of research now and finding out that it was President Trump who instituted a lot of funds for the black community, but it never got there because of the bad leadership, black leadership in Chicago.
So, Kevin, this immigration problem, this problem of people coming here illegally, we hear the minutiae of it, the cases on a case-by-case basis, these crimes being committed and things like that. But it seems like people aren't really getting an answer to the big questions, like why? Why is this stuff happening? It's not just spontaneous. Right. Some people are allowing this to happen. What are the motives of those people? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of study in this, and I've done a lot of study in the black community and the disproportional effects, and I've done a lot of study with politics generally and what the party demographics are and what they would like them to be. And what I've concluded is, with real study, and I'm a doctor and this kind of stuff, and so I looked at it and I said, they boxed themselves in, the Democrat Party I'm speaking of, the leftist progressive. They boxed themselves in, and they weren't anticipating that they'd have to take such a radical approach to make up the difference. Here's what I mean. Historically, they've relied on the black community as a monolith. They said, look, we can always count on this 80, 90%, about 90% of the black community coming in here and pulling lever and giving us power. And then, but they did something fairly radical a generation ago, which is to encourage abortion disproportionately. So whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, doesn't matter. I'm not speaking of that issue in particular. I'm just saying that they disproportionately targeted the black community for extermination. So what happens, the net impact of that is that blacks are diminishing in number. So we don't have the number because we're aborting that next generation, and we're not reproducing. So we're actually choosing to have less children, and we're sort of self-eliminating our progeny for that next generation. So the Democrat Party were in a bit of a quandary. They took a look at this and they said, well, where are we going to get the votes? They also found that when people get around 30, so they get into the workforce and start paying taxes, that their tendencies tend to shift more towards a center-right perspective as opposed to diehard leftist progressive. And they said, so because when people start to get in the workforce, they see their tax situation, they start to shift their perspective around 30, 35. So we're losing that demographic, we're losing the blacks demographic in mass because, they're aborting that next generation. What are we going to do? And they said, well, we can just open up the borders and invite people in here. History tells us that if you advocate for people, bring them in, whether they're literate, illiterate, doesn't matter. A lot of people, as a matter of fact, they've done the study, and a lot of people coming in from all parts of the world are illiterate in their own language. So they have an average of a third or fourth degree education level. So when they come here, they said, okay, well, so that's what we'll do. Open the borders, we'll get them here. Then they said, well, how do we count on those votes? We can't wait for them to become citizens. That takes too long. So they said, what we're going to do is we'll start these sanctuary cities, right? And we'll start to adopt these philosophies. So at least in our major metropolitan areas, we can drive votes out of those areas. And that pretty much will capture the vote for those major states. So like in California, for instance, we have the LA Basin and San Francisco Bay Area. That those two areas run the entire state, even though if you look at the state and map it out, it's pretty much all red, all GOP Republican, except LA Basin, San Francisco Bay Area. But because of the numbers, they drive the policy for the entire state. So what they found is, look, we'll let illegals in. We'll make them, we'll feed them, we'll house them, we'll give them, free education, free healthcare, whatever, just so they stay here. They'll then pull the lever for us because they're so thankful, right, that we're giving them a new life, a new opportunity. Who wouldn't, right? And then they said, and that'll take care of the delta that we're losing with blacks and that we're losing with people as they grow up and they start to see things differently. And so that's what it is. It is literally a replacement. It's not theory. They call it, that's just conspiratorial replacement theory. No, you just look at the numbers. You look at the demographics. This is a calculated business decision from the Democrat Party perspective. So this is what they've done. And for them, actually, up until this past election, it's actually worked out fairly well, right? Because they've been able to get these illegals to vote by virtue of handing them out, driver's licenses early. And in most states, like in California, that's all you used to require is driver's license. Now we don't even have a driver's license requirement. I mean, everybody in the state gets a ballot. And this is what they want to go to next, right, is what Gavin Newsom did in California says, we're going to have COVID rules in perpetuity. So that means that every door gets a ballot, even if there was a high-rise apartment and right now it's a vacant lot. Guess what? Those ballots are still delivered there, and the Democrats know, and they drive by and pick up those stacks and bulks of ballots that used to be apartment buildings, and then they take that and then they fill them out. So this is what's been happening, and this is what they're doing. Now they're also using machines and other things now to kind of make sure they get the numbers. But the bottom line is they were in a position where they couldn't rely on votes from the black community anymore because they've encouraged us to abort our future generations, and therefore they had to replenish that somehow, and that's why we have open borders.
So all this rhetoric we hear from these sanctuary mayors about we're a welcoming city and we owe it to the people to give them the best shot, this is all just a ruse for what is
Maintain
actually
power.
For what is actually a voter registration drive, essentially.
Absolutely. It's a ruse to maintain power. And for them, they know that they're bankrupting their city, that they're bankrupting the federal government and all of that. But these people will absolutely do anything for power, just to maintain that power base and power position. So they're going to do whatever it takes. And right now, unfortunately, at the expense of the American citizen, we're having to endure heightened, criminality within our communities. You have to deal with now gangs. Fortunately, they're now characterized as terrorist organizations, so we'll be able to do something about that very quickly. But the bottom line is in these communities, they're willing to sacrifice the American citizen for power, and they're willing to rely on these others from other parts of the world to maintain power. So this is very insidious. In my opinion, it's diabolical. There's nothing American, about it. This is a foreign sort of, cultural Marxist idea, right? Where we could ultimately, we know we're going to collapse this thing, Cloward Piven, and we'll rebuild it, because it's fine. We'll empty the coffers, the dollars. We'll go digital. We'll go with Great Reset. Do a Cloward Piven strategy here in America, and then we'll reset this whole thing. So it's not conspiratorial. This is kind of how they're architecting it going forward, and this is what I see.
So, Kevin, you live in San Francisco.
Yes.
We here in Washington, D.C., look at San Francisco from afar, and what it looks like from here is it's a sanctuary experiment gone horribly wrong. Yeah. There's smash and grab robberies happening in stores. There's human feces on the sidewalk. How much of that is sensationalism by the news? How much of it is real? What's actually happening on the ground there from your experience?
No, it's not sensationalism. It is real. There is a tremendous amount of people from all over the world that have come to San Francisco. The weather is fairly decent. It's pretty good. So it provides a nice climate. The city is beautiful most times. So it has been inundated with this garbage and feces scenario over the past, let's say, 10 years. But it is specifically in pockets within the city. It's not throughout the city. So don't want to paint any false pictures there. But in downtown and in these major tourist areas, this is what you do see. You do encounter a lot of homelessness. And these are homeless Americans, because in deference to the illegals, they'll house and feed them, but they let our vets and our homeless Americans, our single mothers, sleep in their cars because, again, in deference to illegals, this is kind of how they do it. So, but yes, the feces, the crime, the debris all over major parts of San Francisco is a major issue. It's not hyped.
Gavin Newsom has come in for a lot of criticism for the handling of the fires in LA, but one of the things he did not that long ago, just this astonishing piece of video when Xi Jinping came to visit, and the city was miraculously cleaned up, and reporters asked him, "Are you just cleaning this up for his arrival?" And he basically said, "Yes."
Yes.
And the question then is, well, why don't you do that all the time if you can do it?
Exactly. I mean, the city was immaculate at that time. They had, they got rid of the homeless people. I don't know where they took them, but they took them off the street, and the streets were clean. I mean, it was really a nice presentation for the Chinese dictator. And so that just shows you where their priorities are, right? They want to put up a nice, fancy, clean, pristine facade for people who are influential. The Chinese do own a lot in San Francisco, as well as a lot of properties, as well as the politicians. It's no. I can't overstate that Gavin is in some ways conflicted with Chinese money. We have mayors and others within the confines of the city that do get a lot of Chinese donors as well. And so they had to sort of paint this picture, and this is what you saw with that.
I asked Pastor Lowery earlier what was the political temperature in Chicago. Where is it at in California after the LA fires, after all these sanctuary experiments gone wrong throughout the state? Is there any movement away from this policy of just misery that we've seen? I mean, now having said that, a lot of the people in California we know have bought into that mentality and may never be swayed.
Right.
But is there any hope for California as far as a reset of their political philosophy and how they vote, I guess?
Yeah. So I do think that we're seeing a swing, right? This past election, these fires with all these DEI hires, with these, pretty much an all-woman fire department, especially at the higher echelons. And if you look at them, I did see pictures of them. They're, very overweight and all of that. So it's like, how could you be a firefighter, carry a hose, go up these fire trails with, 285 pounds and you're 5'6"? I don't understand it, but that okay. But so we have that, and people have seen this, and they're like, something's wrong with this picture. This doesn't look like a fire department. So we've seen these disparities. We've seen what's happening. We see how the state has really gone downhill lately in our major cities. So what we're doing, really the American citizens in California are waking up. For the most part. And the only reason why I hedge on that is I just saw a recent poll that said only approximately 45 to 50% of Californians hold Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass accountable for what happened with the fires. Now, if you know anything about what actually happened with the fires, everybody, it should be 80, 90%. I know your diehard leftist progressive commies are going to pull a lever, however, 100% for the other side, irrespective of what they do, because it's an ideological war that they're in. But for your thinking Americans that don't really have an affiliation with communism at all, why would you, give them, cover with still voting for them? But here's what I'm seeing. We are not going to make a sea change of difference politically in California until we have a national referendum coming from the Trump administration with one of his secretaries, I don't know who it would fall under, who will say that all states must comply with American citizen voting. So you must be able to show before you vote at the very least in federal elections, but it should be statewide elections as well, you must be an American citizen. And until we do that, California is not going to move. And the reason why is this. I've already mentioned that Gavin Newsom did COVID rules in perpetuity. That means that every single address, illegals, non-illegals, homeless, doesn't matter, everybody gets a ballot. And every single ballot is counted. So what do you do with that? So they don't adjudicate, well, this is an illegal person, this is not. No, every ballot is counted. So how do you overcome that? Realistically, I believe that Republicans have won the past several elections, or at least the past few elections in California. But because our voices, our votes are not counted, and we're relying on other machines to do the counting for us, which we know how they can be, in some cases, manipulated. I don't know how we overcome it other than a federal mandate that American citizen only voting is a federal mandate. So when we do that, we'll be able to overcome this. But until we do, I think we're going to be in we need a lot of help.
I wanted to touch on something that Kevin said about the illegals coming here. As a pastor, we've been working with the homeless that sleep on the viaducts. You might have saw Ben Bergquam and Terry Newsom out there. We called it Tent City. But the black community, especially people that I know in the black community like myself, a lot of the street organizations like the Gangster Disciples, the Vice Lords, they got a bad rap because a lot of those young men, we were the ones who was taking out food to the American citizens, sleeping in the viaducts, sleeping in sleeping bags, cardboard boxes. All of that stuff played an important role to us. How can you sit back and watch American citizens, no matter what color, sleep in inclement weather like we saw somebody yesterday here sleeping on the ground? How can you overlook these people who have been here, who are taxpayers, families down on their luck? How can you let them stay in this condition and yet you bring illegals here? In Chicago, they start opening up closed schools. They're giving them hot meals. They're giving them vouchers for housing in Chicago. They're giving them cars. I mean, all of these things that belongs to the American citizens are being doled away into these people who have not spent one dime into our system. And so that was a driving force, especially for the black community, as well as other communities, to see how are we able to look over our own people and then put these people above them who are being paid in record numbers, because most of the migrants in Chicago, when they got there, when they came across the border, they was instituted cards that had about $5,000 on them. Then when they got to Chicago, they was giving them $10,000 a month to live. Then they turned around, they gave them food stamps. They gave them all the amenities that they needed to survive, and yet not one penny was ever doled out to the people that were sleeping in Tent City. And so I credit the black community for not only standing up, because we've done it. In 2022, I had a march. Myself, David Boxdale's son, Larry Hoover's son. The crime was rampant in Chicago. It was going super crazy. And so these young men contacted me. They said, Pastor, let us get together and take care of our own people. Let us put something together to show the world that black people will stand up for each other, and we stand against the crime. We stand against the gang banging that's not conducive for the black community. So these street organizations who are 501c3s have been the heart of the black community that continue to try to uplift the black community. But the system, when they see guys like that, when they see guys like me who grew up in the city of Chicago, who had people like Larry Hoover and David Boxdale and Jeff Ford, who protected young black men and women, who taught us how to be men. It was the responsibility of us to become self-sufficient, to go to school. We had to keep good grades. We had to be pillars in the community, take care of the seniors. So they demonized black organizations like that so that they can make the world think that these are just thugs, they have no education, they don't want to do nothing. And so we take offense to that because just like right now, the street organizations are the ones who are curtailing the crime. Now, I can tell you this in Chicago, the crime numbers are blown up because as a person who grew up and who was a part of these street organizations who benefited us, I graduated from high school at 15. I went to college, man. I could have graduated from college if I had not dropped out and bought a business. I would have been out of college at about 19 years old. And that came from these street organizations that I grew up taking us under their wings, protecting us, because there were a lot of white gangs when I moved to Chicago to the South Side called the Gaylords. And it was difficult for us to go anywhere because we would always get jumps. And that's the reason why a lot of the black street organizations, like the Gangster Disciples and the Black Peace Storm Rangers, were formed to protect the kids who were going to school who were being attacked by the white gangs. And so those organizations who are still in existence now are still prevalent in the black community. We're still doing positive things. We're trying to educate young men to be men. That's the reason why that Chicago, the government at hand, demonized these organizations that were started by Larry Hoover and Jeff Ford, and now they're political prisoners in war. And that's one of the things we'll talk about a little bit here, because I spoke to Ben this morning. We're going to do a story about that. But these men were taken out of the black community. Thus, now those single-parent moms never had no man character to teach their kids. So they actually put these guys in prison, try to destroy the organizations, and always promote these organizations as crime, dope head, dope dealers, when that was not the true situation it is. And that's why, I'm right now advocating, I'm going to speak to President Trump or his people to let Larry Hoover out of jail. He was put in jail just like the Proud Boy, Enrique Tartario. He got 22 years. He wasn't even at J6. He was somewhere else in the country. But they used people to say, he conspired. He helped the J6, when that's not true. They did the same thing to Larry Hoover, and they did the same thing to Jeff Ford. Larry was very instrumental in a lot of young black men going to college and helped rebuilding the black community and protecting it. And so once that they saw that these guys was not going to back up, because they was teaching us the power of the vote, how we should be, how we should take care of our families, the responsibility, how to create economic development, how to start a business. I was an entrepreneur. And so I started my first business at 17. And I'm at 40, I was basically retired. And that came from the teaching of men who went before me and said, you know what, you guys are going to be smart, you're going to be intelligent, we're going to make sure you're educated, so you're the next future generation of black leaders. And so they produced me. And so that's why I'm advocating for Larry Hoover and Jeff Ford to get out, because they have power. And with that, they'll be able to come back home and they'll help us galvanize these guys out here just doing crazy stuff, because they belong to the set, but they respect Larry and them. So that's what they've done. They put Larry in jail. He's been there since 1973. The man was nowhere near any crimes that was committed. The FBI used the RICO Act to take him down, and he's been there for over 50 years, and the man never committed a crime. His name was just brought up with somebody who did commit a crime, and that's how he ended up in jail. And I want to talk to, I've been in communicado with some of President Trump committees to get him on that pardon list so that he can get out of prison and come back home. He's an old man. He's 74 years old. He's been in there for crimes he didn't commit, so that he can come back home and help us, rebuild the black community, help us get our young men back in check so that they can be productive citizens in society. And I think that is going to be key, not only for here in Chicago, because these street organizations are the ones who put President Trump in office. And you might have heard Trump say, I appreciate what the black and brown community did. But when it came down, and like I said, I've been vocal about the Democratic Party and what they've done to destroy the black community. They took that narrative, and we've been putting it out to these young men, say the power is in the vote. If we vote and we put in good people into office, then they can do what they need to do, not only to uplift the black community, but all other communities in Chicago. So I'm advocating for Larry Hoover and Jeff Ford to get out of prison. They'll bring a very, very positive attitude to the black community and to young black men who idolize them because they're part of the organization. And so that's why he's been there 50 years, because had he been home, a lot of things that you see, the crime, the drugs, all of those things that belong to the organization never existed. Because when I came up, when I became part of the GDs when I was 12, it was a violation. If you didn't take care of your family, if you didn't get good grades, if you wasn't a pillar in the community, you couldn't be a part of nothing. And so I think with that type of leadership, coming back to the black community and the respect that black men have for him, it would kill the crime rate, and it will get us to a place where we will be able to start educating our children more. Their kids will be more interested in education. It has to be taught. So I'm advocating for Larry and Jeff Ford to be released. They're political prisoners, and I think that we can make that happen. We can change the whole trajectory in the black community.
I think the perception of Chicago from the outside has been that it's got this political machine and it's pretty corrupt, and the people there are kind of beaten down and they just go along. But I personally was very impressed with the people of Chicago in this last year and a half, how they just stood up to this insanity going on there and vocalized it like they did. Some of those hearings were wild. I mean, I remember, did you see the one with the one guy, he had brought in the orange prison jumpsuit, and he said to Johnson, he's like, this is waiting for you, basically. I mean, it was funny too, but I really think they deserve some recognition for standing up. And it looked like a completely grassroots thing. It wasn't like some shadowy group was organizing that. It looked like just genuine outrage by the people there.
Well, I wanna send a shout out to some of the other activists. There were some young activists who we all collaborated together. You know, we saw the need. I want to send a shout out to P. Ray, Mark Carter. You might have seen them all over X and everywhere talking about the issues that we were facing in Chicago. And what you're seeing at the city council meeting, these are people in the community. They're totally fed up. They're going to these meetings. They're voicing their opinion. They know, Brandon Johnson knows that he will never be the mayor of Chicago. That he will not be the mayor. They're making it pretty easy for me to step into that position with all the crazy stuff they're doing. But those young activists really have made an impact, and that's why you see them at all the city council meetings. We all worked in different areas. They work toward the city. Me, I work abroad, coming, building relationships with you, Ben Bergquam, and all the rest of the people. So believe me, God blessed me to be a voice in the city of Chicago, but I couldn't be the voice that I am right now had it not been for a collaboration of all the other young activists who did their part. They doing their part right now at the City Hall. Brandon Johnson will never have a City Hall meeting where he can just stand there and not be beaten, because these guys are going to be at every meeting until he's out of office, and we're going to make sure that the people of Chicago know the truth about what he's doing and how we're bringing solutions to the table to fix it, man. So these young guys are going to be there. They're tough as nails. They're not afraid. Brandon tries to intimidate them. He comes after them in different ways, but we're going to stay strong. All of us going to stay in our lanes, but yet in one house and do what we do. That's how we were able to achieve a 47% Republican vote in the state this past election. And that came from all of us doing different things and getting to the black community to be able to get out and vote and do what we needed to do. But let me say this. I want to send a shout out to Barack Obama. See, Barack, I'm a true Chicagoan. And so when you come to our city and you trick the black people into thinking that you were going to be about black men and women and all of that stuff. And then when he got into office, he distanced himself from the black community. When they started talking about, well, they thought Barack Obama was going to come in and make sure the black community would be, uplifted and we would find some equality, it was never about that. Barack did the same thing that all the other Democrats have done. They've lied to black people. They've used them. And so this last thing, after his time was over, a lot of black people just held Barack in such high esteem as if he was a god. But as he got out of office, and he never did nothing, the black community realized that he was never cared about us, or was he going to do anything? And so now that black people know Barack Obama was nothing but a front, how dare you, Barack, tell black men that we better get out and vote for Kamala Harris when she's not one of us. She's never done nothing for black people. She's not even black, but her birth certificate says she's an Indian. And so by him disrespecting us like that, that's why you saw the record numbers. The grassroots black people, and I keep bringing Larry and Jeff up, these were the kids that they helped raise up like me. We were the ones who said, okay, you know what? We see you, Barack, but guess what? Because of your disrespect for us, man, we started a voting campaign throughout the black community this past election. And when the black men decided that, because black men wasn't voting, the numbers will show it. They was like, oh no, most of the guys are, I don't want to do it. They're going to cheat the election anyway. But when Barack came out and did that, the disrespect of black men, they voted in record numbers. In the city of Chicago, and some of the black wards, it was 5-1 for Kamala Harris, 3-1, 4-1. And so we set the message to America that the black man is still alive and prevalent, and that when the issues comes like this, no longer are we going to sit back and allow people to say, well, black men aren't being the men in the community. I think right now America sees that the black community is still a powerful voting base, and that now we're starting to organize ourselves. We're saying, guess what? We can make a difference in the election. And so for this election coming up, that message was out there. Black men, our children, our families, our relatives, we went to the polls in droves and voted for President Trump. And basically, we turned Illinois red because they said we had 47%. But I did some work in the primaries. Remember, I told you about what we did in the primaries. We went out, we monitored the polls, and the fact that we found the thumb drives, the printers, ballots not being accessible to the black people in the black community, when we put that out there, then we sort of forced the Democrats into a position now they say, oh, well, they've exposed us. And so when we exposed them like that, it was difficult for them to try to cheat and say, well, black men are voting in record numbers when that never happened. But we went to the polls and we voted in droves so that we can show America the black community is not dead. We just sat back because we got disenchanted with the Democrats, but they love and respected President Trump for him being who he is, calling a spade, and dealing with the issues with the Democrat. That resonated with black men across the country. And I think from this time forward, you're going to see the black community rise up, and the numbers in the black community will be astronomical voting against the Democratic Party, because they will never be, believe me, black people are off the plantation and the mine with the Democrats, and we know right now that it's all the NGOs, the black Greeks that are stealing the money out the black community, and that's why it's dying.
So, Kevin, you were talking to me earlier about your book. Tell us what it's about.
Yeah, so one of the things, so I received my doctorate last year, and one of the things that I realized is that there's some sort of pathological issues. When we hold on to ideology so very strong, it turns into a predictable pathology that we kind of follow, right? That our basic ontology sort of aligns with, and we start just marching. And a lot of times it goes unnoticed, and we just kind of just flow with it. When it comes to American politics, that's exactly what's happening. So I started to do some research, and this book is called Revealed, The Archetypes of American Politics. And in my research, I found that there was one very brilliant observation that Malcolm X made over 60 years ago. It was 1963, Message to the grassroots was his message, his speech, and it was in Michigan. And basically, his speech, he delivered his observation of America. He says, "Look, I've taken a look at the plantation life and antebellum South, and life on the plantation." And he says basically there are three roles or characterizations of the interpersonal communications and dynamics on a plantation. And he says you have your overlord. He says now the overlord is really the plantation owner. He says in this case the overlord would be, because he says metaphorically it maps to where America is. He says in this case the overlord would be like the government politicians that are in those positions. And he says, and so the overlord is vested in making sure that the plantation just continues. And the best way to do that is to deceive, manipulate, and to sort of, manipulate people on the plantation so they can continue to fulfill the overall dictates of the overlord. He says, so those would be what he would call the house Negro or the house slave. He says house slaves live on the plantation with the owner in the plantation's house, in the plantation owner's house, and usually in the attic or the basement. They eat with the family, so they eat with the main family, get the choice scraps off the table. The overlord gives them the hand-me-down, so they get the best of the best. He says that what's interesting about the house Negro, though, is that they're incented to actually spy or snitch, if you will, on anybody in the field that's looking to escape. That's their only job. All you have to do is act like a foreman, go out there, make sure that the rest of the slaves are working, and to make sure that nobody escapes. So, again, if you have America as a plantation and being run by government officials, and then you have your house Negro type or house slave types, those would be the mainstream media, making sure that we keep everybody in this particular narrative about, plantation narrative about how great and exceptional it would be if we could have, some form of socialism or wealth redistribution or reparations. These are all sort of in that neo-Marxist kind of narrative. And so their primary incentive, the reason why we had so many disparaging remarks for people who would just say, I think I want to vote differently this time. I think, this Democrat thing with Biden and triple-digit inflation is not working for me and my family. I think I want to vote different this time. The reason why they came after us so strong, calling us Nazis, Hitler, all of these horribly disparaging words, white supremacist, racist, and all the other tropes as well, is because they have to keep us on the plantation. So he said mainstream media. Obviously, your actors and personalities in Hollywood are on that, and then your academics. So they all play a role in making sure that they keep people in a particular mindset so we can all march towards this utopian overlord dream. And overlords today would be more like your globalists, so Soros, World Economic Forum, World Health Organization, those types of things. So the field Negroes, those would be like he characterized himself, Malcolm X, and then he said Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman are the ones who are absolutely committing to escape any kind of plantation mindset. We're the ones who say, look, it's us and God. I don't need man as an intermediary. I can think on my own. I am truly independent, and I'm a free thinker. And so, no, I don't want any kind of authoritarian or totalitarian rule. I'm going to make my own way and do my own thing. Those are the ones who leave the plantation. Those are the ones who are committed to escaping the plantation. Those would be people like us, independent thinkers. We pull the lever who we want. We're not. You can call us whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter. We're free. And so in this book, I break down all of those archetypes. And I actually name names and name organizations that fit the particular archetype so people can begin to put together who those are, where they fit, and who are the main, arbiters, if you will, of these specific characterizations. So this is all laid out here. Now, I do deal with the immigration issue in there as well, because I say, look, following the pathology. Now, of course, the term Negro in this book is not a disparaging term. It's trying to point to a particular type of psyche that we're dealing with today. So it's a pathology I'm dealing with, and that has nothing to do with skin color or anything like that. So anybody and everybody in America fits one of these three archetypes. So when it comes to the border, when it comes to illegal immigration, what I called out in here is you have all your feminist organizations. Let's say we just want to empower women, we want the best for women and girls, we want them to grow up to be nice. But yet, they are perfectly willing to allow the sacrifice of women and girls coming across our border to be raped multiple times on the way up. And this is the overwhelming majority of them, women and girls, are raped multiple times, 10 plus, coming up to our border. And they think that's the price of admission. It should appall anybody who has a heart, right? This is just appalling. We have a lot of ministers and pastors who were, evangelicals for Harris. We have leftist progressive pastors I call out in this book as well, who they say that they want only the best, God's best for each and every one of us, but yet they'll sign on to an open border where these types of horrible things are going on. And it doesn't end when they get here. These people are then trafficked, as you know, Brian, multiple times across the United States to pay off the debt. So we're actually, allowing and encouraging enslavement of women and girls in particular, and at the expense of what? If we have a heart, if we're sincere about loving people and loving humanity, the border is is a perfect example of how we don't do that. We become the number one child sex slavery country in the world because of our open border. Now that should concern all of us, especially us who have morals, ethics, faith, but yet we have so many people that are acting out of the concern of the overlords, the globalist overlords, to get us to a reset. It's okay, it's fine. And these are the house Negro type, the house slave types that'll drive us to that. Ideology is driving them, and a particular pathology is driving them, but not principles, not morals, not ethics, not anything that you could say, no theological foundations. So this is what this book deals with, and it deals with, like I said, immigration in that way. It really breaks it down so you can see, well, wait a minute, this is inhumane. This is a scourge on all humanity, and we should all be quite perturbed about it and be willing to close our borders and do something about it. The last thing that I would say about this is that you have Tom Homan, who is absolutely committed to ending the scourge and the assault on the American public, as well as the scourge and assaults on the women and girls especially, but also some little boys that are abused coming up here. He's in my opinion, he's got the right mindset, the right aptitude, the right people to do it, ICE and all the associated agents to get that done. I think that he would do himself even better as well to have a multi-pronged approach whereby he actually encourages the use of surveillance cameras on drones when these people are coming up. So I think, in general, a multi-pronged approach for Tom to have the maximum success with this effort is to, and I'm an IT guy, so I follow this stuff very, very closely. And, I know of a particular type of a surveillance mechanism that basically will allow you to capture only specific things in the database, so it's looking only for specific facial characteristics. All other people are grayed out. So if you have people that are coming through our borders that are on the global terror watch list, it will immediately see them while they're in Mexico or coming through the border. Even if they're in a big caravan. So it's not doing a one-to-one. It's actually doing mass surveillance, but it's picking out specific things, and the rest of them are like noise, white noise, and it only brings forward the terrorist. That kind of technology could really, really help, especially if you use drones or you have these types of cameras all along the border, so you can actually do that. Also, people that are multiple offenders we've already kicked out multiple times, but they continue to come through our borders. These are the people that could be in a database, and so it immediately notify, hey, this guy, we've taken him out of here 4 or 5 times. He's coming back through the border now. These are the types of things that are proactive that would help that front line and prevent people from getting here. The other thing that I would say is that people like Pastor Dave and myself, and our community, to go out to sanctuary states and sanctuary cities and actually break up that fallow ground, meet with city council members, mayors, governors, and legislatures, and actually take them through from a ethnic perspective how destructive sanctuary designations are to our specific community. So you can have black and brown individuals go out and actually have half-day sessions with legislators and people who are in authority, because a lot of these people don't hear from people like us, especially with our perspective. And they, quite honestly, some of them are ignorant, but some of them know what's going on, but some are ignorant. We think we can bring people along and break up some of that resistance if we're able to go out there early and help break up that sort of fallow ground. So I think that's another approach that can be done. And the last thing I would say is that his particular area is going to be absolutely positively targeted by CCP, Russia, and that for cyber attacks. And so I also have a technology in cyber that's world class. But the point is that because the work is so important, it's a heavy target. If they targeted our treasury, the CCP is in our treasury system right now, it's already verified. We need to mitigate any cyber attacks within CBP or within Homeland Security, because this is the agency that's absolutely essential. So those are just some things that I think that can be done to augment Tom's success. He's going to be successful, and we want to help him as much as we can. All right, so lastly, I'll say this. When Black Lives Matter started several years ago, tearing up the streets, rioting and looting and racializing everything, and then we saw that there were so many pastors and ministers encouraging their churches and parishioners to do the same. We thought that was a bridge too far. So we started an organization called Every Black Life Matters, illuminating the pro-life, the life issue, and we wanted to be the alternate, the righteous and faithful alternative to Black Lives Matter. So we're 100% pro-life, 100% pro-legal immigration, 100% pro-fatherhood, 100% free markets and capitalism. We're everything that the crazy Marxist revolutionaries are not. And so people can find me there if you want to know more about my books, or just follow us in some of our policies and things that we're providing or presenting. You can follow us at everyblm.com. And of course, I have all my writings there and several books that you can choose from as well to learn more about it.
Pastor Lowery, you're just such a slouch. You're not up to anything. It's really you got to get off the couch, but that's the opposite of the truth. You're involved in everything, it seems like. You are also the host of one of my favorite podcasts, Let the Truth Be Told. So beyond that, or if you want to talk about that, but what else would you say in closing?
I want folks to know that the myth, I want to destroy the myth that President Trump is a racist, because in the black community, the Democrats were able to poison a lot of blacks who have been voting democratically to make us think that President Trump is a Ku Klux Klan or a racist. In all actuality, it was Joe Biden, who was a grand dragon for the Klan, who created the crime bill that incarcerated a lot of young black men who are still in jail to this very day. I credit President Trump for creating that First Step program. And that program came out of another program that the black community needs to get themselves up on. In 2019, President Trump created the Platinum Plan, and folks, look it up. And in this plan in 2019, when he was going to implement it and before the election was stolen, this plan would allow the black community to get back on its feet. $500 billion that will be put into the black community. There will be over 500,000 new businesses created. It'll bring 3.2 million job opportunities for the black community, onshore manufacturing that can do a lot for us. The Platinum Plan that President Trump put together, and folks, you have to look at it, would restore the black community to a prominence that I saw when I was growing up in Inglewood, in Chicago, where I grew up. The black community was self-sufficient. We owned our own stores, gas stations. We had banks. We had all of those things. And in 2019, when President Trump created this, it was hijacked by the Democrats. So President Trump is back in office. And one of the things that I've been meeting with some of his people about, and I asked President Trump, please reinstitute the Platinum Plan. Black folks, if you don't know what it is, take a look at the Platinum Plan, because all the economics, financial stability, the second step program that will follow the first step program will continue to release black men out of jail who are not supposed to be there in the second step plan. It will also allow a lot of the black political leaders like Larry and Jeff to be brought out of jail so that they can assist the black community. But the key thing of it is, and this is why I really applaud President Trump, is that in this plan, the Platinum Plan, it makes the black community self-sufficient. And I'm not saying that we want to be pro-black to the point where we're not Americans. All Americans should be concerned about the black community, and as Americans, we should be trying to uplift the black community. And that's what President Trump did in this plan. It allows us to rebuild our communities. It allows us to maintain our own schools. It allows us to be able to create the economic engine in the black community to make it prosper. And so to black leadership and black people out here, the bad leadership will lead you to believe that President Trump is a racist, and that's not true. It's far from it. But if you look at the Platinum Plan like I did, I really didn't understand it at first. I'd heard about it, but when I researched it and I looked at it and I saw all the opportunities in it to make the black community strong again, I'm promoting to say, black people, do some research. Let's find out the truth, because I think right now we see what the Democrats have really done to us. They've lied to us. They've stole our communities. They've brought illegals in. They doesn't care about our homeless. Nothing in the black community is done right under this leadership. But under President Trump's plan, with the Platinum Plan, it would give us our independence. It will restore us. It will restore our schools, our communities. So all of these things is what's needed in the black community, because we all are Americans. And just like I said earlier, believe it or not, when one of us as Americans hurt, no matter what color we are, we all hurting. So I advise people to go research the Platinum Plan and then see it for yourself on what President had done to help our community get on its feet. Folks, you can find me at X, at David Lowery Jr. 1. You can find me on Facebook, David Lowery Jr. And I want to let you know, Brian, we're in the process of creating our own television station. We're having a platform built. Kevin's going to have a show on there. So we want to be an informational network to not only the black community, but to make sure they understand what's out there, how we should be thinking, how we should deal with politics, how we should deal with immigration. So this platform will allow black people to go there and say, you know what, I need to know about this. We will have different programs and different shows that bring solutions to the black community, and that's what's going to be important. We need solutions, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep promoting President Trump's Platinum Plan, and now that he's in office, he can go ahead on and implement it so that we can get back on our feet. But I want to thank everybody for having us here. You, Brian, you've been a strong supporter in my rise to where I'm at right now. It was you who created my intro songs, and it's just the fact that we see people who are Americans coming together like Ben Berquam, you, David Zier, Steve Bannon. It's all about us being Americans. It's all about us coming together as one America and making sure that we can make America great again. So if you need me, you can find me. My number is 708-663-5262, or you can go to our website, LetTheTruthBeToldRadio.com. LetTheTruthBeToldRadio.com. Leave your information if you want to be a part of this movement to uplift the black community and return it to promise. Give me a call, leave a message so that we can get with you and we can become one America again. God bless you, and thank you.
I want to applaud you too, real quick, Brian. IRLI, let's face it, America would be so much less without you guys doing the frontline work. So I want to applaud you for your vision and your model going forward to actually restore our communities, not just the black community, but all communities across America, by virtue of reducing or eliminating the illegal nature of those that live in those communities. It's very important work, so I want to applaud you and the whole team for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin McGary, Pastor David Lowery, thanks again for taking the time to come in here today. It's going to be a wild ride the next 4 years, so let's keep in touch and reconvene and talk about what happens.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Immigration Reform Law Institute, go to irli.org. If you found this information useful and you'd like to support the show, go to irli.org/podcast. You can also hear this show on Apple Podcasts, Rumble, and Spotify. And don't forget to check us out on all the major social media platforms. Thanks again.